Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Premonition by C.M. Sutter, narrated by Nicole Zanzarella. Chapter 1. Kate. She ran for her life as soon as she got her footing. One shoe had come off during the fall. The ride she accepted on the lonely stretch of road that cold night was a horrible mistake, and that split second of bad judgment could very well be her last. The hard fall momentarily knocked the wind out of her when she hit the gravel and tumbled. She had no other choice, fall and run or get killed in that psycho's truck. While traveling at 30 miles an hour, she grabbed the door handle and jumped. Sharp gravel stones from the road's shoulder tore open her hands and face and embedded themselves in her flesh. She heard the truck screech to a stop, then the sound of the shifter being ground into reverse. She was already running for cover, and her knees ached from the impact. Should I scream for help or stay quiet and hope he doesn't find me? She heard the truck door open and slam closed. He's after me. I have to run. Her frantic, gasping screams echoed through the dark fields, but the panicked cries went unheard, except by the man closing the distance between them. She had hoped the cornfield, still unharvested, would give her cover. But instead, the dried stalks, taller than she was, scraped against her skin and crackled with noise. Their sounds gave her away as they slapped her face and poked her eyes. The furrowed row tripped her, and she stumbled to the ground. She waited motionless and hoped he'd give up. She wasn't ready to die. Her only chance at survival would come from the cover of night. Remaining still was difficult. She knew he was only feet away. She heard him call out, taunting her. He promised to find her and end her life. Her nostrils flared and her lungs burned as she sucked in much-needed oxygen. Nothing but acres of corn lay ahead. There were no farmhouses or beacons of hope to run to, and her only ray of light was the crescent moon. Movement several rows back perked her ears. She held her breath. He was too close. She felt the cool smoothness of a rock in the dirt and wrapped her fingers around it, grasping it tightly in the palm of her hand. She threw it with all her might, hoping for an extra 20 feet between them. Did he turn left? It was now or never. She had to run. If she stopped, she would most certainly die. He was closing in, and he had a knife. She thought about the deadly mistake she'd made only 20 minutes earlier. After sputtering for the last mile, her car had slowed to a stop. Half asleep and worn out from the drive, she had forgotten to fill it with gas when she passed through the last town. Now, after being detoured off the interstate by construction, she was stranded on that desolate 2-lane road in the middle of farm country, out of gas at nearly 3 a.m. Darkness surrounded her as she stepped out of the car and slammed the door. She panned the surroundings for house lights, but saw nothing. Anxiety and the late-night cold clouded her judgment. Those approaching headlights were a welcomed relief when the truck slowed to a stop. She was thankful. The driver who offered her a ride was a godsend until she climbed in and they disappeared down that long stretch of road. The sounds closing in brought her back into the moment. Focus. Run. There's no time to think. She stumbled when the cornstalks hit her from behind. He was only steps away, and it was too late. She felt his hot breath on her neck and fell to the ground when the knife sliced through her throat. Her life slipped away seconds later. The alarm buzzed its loud, annoying sound on the side table, and the nightmare abruptly ended. Kate's eyes bulged open with fear. Her heart thumped triple time in her chest. She could hear it in her ears. Once she got her bearings, she realized it was a dream, and that nonstop buzz in her head was the clock. She rolled to her left and turned it off, then squinted at the numbers. 7 o'clock. With a heavy sigh, she sat up and ground her fists into her eyes. Her temples pounded out her heartbeats. She wiped her clammy forehead with the back of her hand. Her flailing in bed mixed with perspiration had tangled her normally beautiful black ringlets into a knotted mess. The pillowcase with its ivory crocheted edge was wet to the touch. She stripped it from the pillow and dropped it to the floor. Was the nightmare just that? or a premonition. The detail made it seem so real. As she sat on the edge of the bed, Kate needed a moment to regroup. Then she rose and slipped on her white chenille robe. In the bathroom, she turned the cold water handle on the faucet and held a washcloth under the stream. She squeezed the cloth and pressed it against her face. The sharp cold diverted her anxiety for a second, then she sighed. Kate had lived in North Bend for only a few years, and that furnished efficiency apartment above the hardware store downtown worked well enough for her needs. She hadn't decided whether or not she'd stay and put down roots in this bedroom community 40 minutes north of Milwaukee. So far, friendships hadn't come easily. The conservative town of under 30,000 people had plenty of skeptics. Atlanta had been Kate's home for her first 23 years, but as a cautious person, she knew she couldn't remain there anymore. She needed to be somewhere safe and far away from the reach of Robert Lynch and his associates. The North Bend Sheriff's Department personnel had scoffed last year when she'd offered her services as a psychic investigator on several of the county's missing person cases. She explained to them how she had been instrumental in assisting with cases in Nashville and most recently Chicago. She had the newspaper clippings to prove it. In Washburn County, the buttoned-up nature of North Bend's law enforcement won out, and her help wasn't encouraged or welcomed. Kate's sole income in the last few years had come from one-on-one private readings in her living room, lectures, and psychic booths she operated at local fairs. Other than the lectures, which were usually offered twice a year and held in Milwaukee or Madison, the readings and fortune-telling were considered sideshow amusements and hardly taken seriously. She dried her face on the towel, pulled her hair back in a barrette, and left the bathroom. Her shearling slippers were warm and silent against the hardwood-floored hallway as she walked to the kitchen. She cinched the belt on her robe a little tighter when a shiver fluttered up her spine. The windows in that old brick building were in serious need of replacement, and they chattered when the wind blew in from the north. Next month she would tape plastic over them to keep out the winter chill. The galley kitchen was compact, and with her arms outstretched she could touch the walls on either side. An off-white formica countertop covered with tiny mid-century modern blue and yellow starbursts held the coffee pot and a mixer she never used. Covering much of that space were rings of coffee stains that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she scrubbed. The apartment-sized refrigerator, two-burner gas stove, and the single sink with barely enough room to set a dish drainer on the counter filled the rest of the kitchen. A place setting for 4 was all she had space for in the cupboard above the sink, and it was all she needed anyway. The cabinets consisted of a silverware drawer, towel and hot pad drawer, 2 cupboards above the sink for dishes and glasses, and 2 cupboards below the counter for cookware and large bowls. A broom closet in the corner incorporated a small makeshift pantry and held 3 shelves for food storage. Kate was thankful she lived alone in that small space. In that tiny apartment, she could live on the cheap and still have the ability to make a speedy exit if the need ever presented itself. Mr. Myers, the building owner, had collected the first and last month's rent as well as a security deposit when she moved in. She never understood why. The apartment was far from a nice place to live. With the paper filter in place, Kate pulled the plastic lid off the coffee can and dropped 3 scoops of Colombian roast grounds into the basket. She thought about the dream again as she turned on the faucet and filled the carafe with 6 cups of water, then poured it into the reservoir and flipped the switch. As she sat at the kitchen table, Kate picked up the yellow legal pad that was always within reach. She jotted down the date and what she remembered from that dream. She massaged her forehead and dug deep into her mind's eye. She briefly saw orange road construction barrels and a detour sign. She wrote that down. The color of the car was white or tan, or possibly pale yellow. Void of any street lights, that dark road and inky black night made the car's color hard to distinguish, but she was certain it was light. Was it large or small? 2-door or 4? Kate closed her eyes again and saw the young woman exit the vehicle and zip up a fleece jacket while she paced and took in her surroundings. The car was a 2-door with a hatchback. She wrote that down, then tried to focus on the car's plate number, but it was in the shadows. Steam rose from the coffee Kate poured into the poppy-red ceramic mug. She took a sip and tried to recall what the woman looked like. With her eyes pinched tight, she saw anxious fingers twisting long blonde hair. The woman wore a turquoise and silver ring on her right index finger, and she had coral-colored acrylic nails. The fleece jacket popped back into Kate's mind, pink with an embroidered crown on the left front. Where did she run out of gas, and where did she come from? Kate heard music playing, but it could have been the car's radio meant to keep the woman awake at that late hour. For the last time, she closed her eyes and pressed her temples. What did the man look like? What color was the truck he was driving? She scratched out what she could remember and looked over her notes. With her memories on paper, she made the call. Chapter 2. I turned into the sheriff's department parking lot and glanced at the clock. 7:30 on the nose. I killed the engine, pulled my travel mug from the cup holder, grabbed my purse off the passenger seat, and exited the car. The cold morning air bit my cheeks, and the wind swirled in my hair. I walked to the building at a quickened pace, my head down and my shoulders stiff and raised. I wasn't fond of the cold. Never was, never would be. Since my dad had moved to Southern California, living in Wisconsin had lost a lot of its appeal. I missed him more and more every year. As a child, we'd rake leaves together in late October and drink hot cider. In November, we'd have the huge Thanksgiving spread and eat leftovers until nearly Christmas. December would bring the snow and ice. Dad and I would bundle up from head to toe, then trudge outside looking like the Michelin Man and build a snowman. Other times we'd go ice skating at Regner Park. As an adult, I justified living in the Midwest during the cold months because of those two family holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. I wanted Amber to have a sense of family unity. After the holidays, all I wanted was heat. I wasn't an outdoor enthusiast anyway, unless curling up in the sun like a snake and basking for hours counted. Maybe I could do that in my next life. So far in this one, I hadn't had the luxury of time. Jack hadn't arrived yet, and his parking spot was still empty. He'd started making an attempt to get to work before 8 a few months back, and even beat me there on several occasions. I was impressed, but he was slowly slipping back into his old habits. It must have been the cold. Lingering in a warm bed didn't sound half bad now that I thought about it. I entered the building with the wind at my feet. Dead leaves swirled through the first set of doors and settled in the corners of the vestibule. Inside at the reception and dispatch counter, I chatted with Jan and Peggy for a bit before punching the security code into the panel next to the door and entering the bullpen. I did a quick scan of the room. Jameson and Horbeck were packing it up. Their shift was over and Billings had already arrived. Through the wall of glass, I saw Clark sitting at his desk. Behind the closed door, he read the morning paper and held a styrofoam cup of coffee between his hands. The steam swirled above the cup. This was his 15 minutes of normalcy before the beginning of our workday, which oftentimes turned hectic. He looked up and nodded a good morning through the glass. I nodded back. The mountain of paperwork on my desk multiplied daily. I could barely remember the color of the desktop buried under that mess. I had already made up far too many excuses, saying it was organized clutter, but nobody bought it. I needed to dig in. Jack and I had to head over to the courthouse at 10:30 to appear in front of Judge Cocker as witnesses for the prosecution in the Mandy Blakely case. Her trial was scheduled for 11 o'clock, and as usual, the media was in a frenzy preparing for the event. Mandy had been locked up in our jail for the last 2.5 months, awaiting her trial, and I was sure she would plead insanity when all was said and done. No matter what, I felt bad for her. Under the influence of her mentally unstable mother, Mandy had been brainwashed into killing. Even though 3 deaths were at her hand, I felt she was somewhat of a victim herself. The beeps of someone entering the security code sounded from the other side of the door. I looked at the clock. 7:45. If it was Jack, I'd be impressed. Clayton entered and headed for the beverage station. I snickered. "What's with the snicker?" "Nothing. Maybe someone should be assigned to pick up Jack for work." "Like a school bus?" I chuckled. "Yeah, like that." My desk phone rang. "Hello, Sergeant Jade Monroe. How can I help you?" "Sergeant Monroe, it's Kate Pierce." My smile instantly soured, and I was sure my impatience came through in my voice. I didn't have the time or energy to tolerate Kate's alleged premonitions. In my opinion, she was one of the most recent North Bend kooks. I drummed my fingers on an unfiled stack of papers and checked the time. She'd get 5 minutes and not a second more. "Good morning, Kate. What's up?" "Can I come in and talk to you? The dream I had last night was so vivid and terrifying. It has to be a premonition. I have a bad feeling about this one." "Kate, you've had a bad feeling about the last several dreams you called in, and nothing came of them. I have a busy day ahead of me." The silence on the other end of the phone line was deafening and made me uncomfortable. I'd dealt with our local paranormal on several occasions, and in my mind she was a charlatan and a cheesy psychic at best. The booth she had at every carnival, festival, and work party proved it to me. I did better working with real people with real issues, not ghosts, dreams, and hunches. "This dream was different, Sergeant. It's not my intention to waste your time. Please, just give me 10 minutes. I've already written everything down." "Send it to me in an email, and I promise to read it. I have court today and a mountain of paperwork to clear off my desk." "I suppose if there's no other way. It's about a young woman who ran out of gas on—" "Kate, just email it to me. I really have to go. Goodbye." I clicked off just as Jack entered the bullpen. Billings was still laughing as he filled my coffee mug and his own. "What did I miss?" Jack asked as he plopped down on his chair. "You'd know if you weren't the last to arrive at work every day." "Ouch." Jack gave me a frown, then looked at Billings and Clayton. "What's up her rear?" Clayton rolled his eyes. "Kate Pierce, that's what." Jack ducked when I threw a piece of balled-up paper at him. He laughed when I missed him and hit Billings square in the face with it. I apologized. "Sorry, Adam, that wasn't meant for you." I made a face at Jack. "Why doesn't she call you instead? She's single, you're both cute and close in age. Sounds like a match made in heaven to me." "Or not. I consider myself someone with at least half a brain and would hate to be ridiculed for lacking sound judgment. She's kind of flaky, you know?" Jack took off his sports jacket and slipped it over the chair bag. He filled his brown ceramic mug and returned to his desk. "Anyway, back to you. Looks like you have quite the messy desk, Sergeant. Need any help clearing it?" Jack's dimpled grin always softened me. "Sure, thanks, partner." I handed him a stack of papers to file away, then dug back in. 10:15 arrived before I knew it. After a decent dent was made in my filing, thanks to Jack's help, my desk phone rang. John from upstairs was calling to say they were loading Mandy into the van to take her to the courthouse. I thanked him, clicked off, and told Jack we had to go. With the courthouse being at the west side of the block of county buildings, it was a 5-minute walk outside before we'd enter a long corridor filled with government offices. All of the courtrooms were on the second floor. "We're leaving soon, Jack, just a heads up." He nodded and took a stack of files to the records room down the hall. 15 minutes later, with my jacket collar pulled up around my neck and the buttons securely fastened, Jack and I headed into the mid-morning chill and took the long sidewalk to the courthouse annex. I had seen Mandy several times since her arrest early in September. With the jail located on the second floor of the sheriff's department, I had stopped in to talk to her twice at her request. She'd asked if her family had received proper burials, and I had explained how Mariah and Alice, her sister and mother, had been cremated at the county's expense. Her father, Dean, on the other hand, had been transported to Medford, where his sister and brother-in-law laid him to rest at the cemetery in town. That bit of information seemed to satisfy her. She also wanted to know what would happen to her after the trial. I explained that those were questions she needed to discuss with her court-appointed attorney, not me. Jack pressed the button for the up elevator. 4 people stood against the walls and nodded when we entered, and the doors closed behind us. Courtroom 2E was the 5th courtroom down the marble-floored hallway on our left. Hushed conversations lingered in the halls as people waited outside their courtrooms for their cases to be heard. I checked the docket on the wall next to our courtroom door, and Mandy's case was still set for 11 o'clock. Jack and I took a seat on a nearby bench and waited. Chapter 3. I checked the time on my cell phone before powering it down. I reminded Jack to shut his off, too. The courtroom door would be opening any minute, and we'd be ushered in. The crowd of people gathering in front of courtroom 2E grew as we waited. Some were family members of the victims, and some were curious strangers wanting to hear morbid details as the evidence was presented. They wanted seats at the trial of the year. I was surprised they didn't show up with bags of popcorn in hand. I recognized several people waiting to enter along with us. The families of victims Larry Taylor, David Smith, and John Leiter were all there. Betty, the post office clerk who had helped in apprehending Mandy, and the postmaster, James McHenry, were among the crowd. Jack and I chatted with a few of them while we waited. Farther down the hallway, reporters were preparing to make their initial broadcasts. This trial was front-page news in every newspaper in southeast Wisconsin. The courtroom door opened and people funneled in. The bench seats filled quickly. From a side door, Mandy entered, led in by a deputy. She wore an orange jumpsuit, white socks, and black rubber sandals. Shackles caused her to shuffle into the courtroom with slow, small steps. Her dyed blonde hair had grown out a bit, and dark roots covered the top of her head. She appeared haggard and older-looking than her young age. I saw her search the crowd of people for a familiar face. She smiled when her eyes met mine. That tugged at my heartstrings, yet I knew I had a job to do. Innocent families wanted justice. Mandy's handcuffs were removed once she was seated next to her attorney, and a plastic cup of water was placed in front of her. Court was called to order, and everyone rose when Judge Cocker entered the courtroom and took the bench. The first day of Mandy's trial began. The testimonies Jack and I gave covered that eventful day several months back. It began with the scene at the post office, with Mandy's sister, Mariah, holding me at knife point, and ended when Mandy shot her own mother in the Blakely home. Betty from the post office was called to testify and had to relive the events from that day as well. Mandy's taped interview in the interrogation room at the sheriff's department was played for all to hear. The psychiatrist Mandy had been assigned to, Deanna Livingston, also testified as an expert witness. Her opinion, as well as my own, was that Mandy was a deeply disturbed young lady and should be committed to an institution rather than a prison for hardened criminals. Jack and I returned to the bullpen at 3 o'clock and told the condensed version of how the trial had gone that day.
"Your desk phone rang a half-dozen times since you've been gone, Jade. You probably have a few messages," Clayton said, giving me a heads-up.
"Thanks, Chad." I chuckled and rolled my eyes when he grinned from ear to ear. He wasn't used to me calling him by his first name. "Anyone want coffee besides me? I really need some right now." They mumbled their affirmative responses. I started a 12-cupper, then dropped back into my chair. I picked up my desk phone and listened to the messages. Whatever. With a jiggle of the mouse, I woke up my computer and logged in. Using the roller wheel, I scrolled down until I found Kate's email from that morning. Jack raised his right brow in question.
"What's wrong?"
The messages were all from Kate Pierce, wanting to know if I've read the email she sent this morning. I told her I had a busy day ahead of me, yet she takes it upon herself to leave 3 messages asking if I've read it yet. She's seriously getting on my nerves. Billings winked at me and piped in.
"Well, have you read them?"
I shot him the stink eye. "Guess I am now. I'll let her know to contact you from now on."
"Don't you dare."
Billings smirked and filled my mug. I thanked him and took a sip. As I leaned in and rested my head in my hand, I went over the 4-paragraph description of the dream Kate had last night. Geez, there's a lot of information here for a dream. Thank goodness she isn't credible. If she were, we'd be chasing bad guys nonstop. Jack tapped his pen against his desk and huffed.
"We already do, don't we?" "So what's she saying?"
Clark asked as he joined in on our conversation. "It's her typical ranting, boss. A young lady's car runs out of gas in the middle of the night on a remote country road. She's picked up by a stranger in a truck. A bad guy, of course, and that leads to him slitting her throat in a cornfield somewhere. I looked back at Clark leaning against the doorframe of his office. I groaned. Fine, I'll check to see if there's been a young blonde woman reported missing in the last 24 hours. Thanks, Jade. You just never know. One of these days, she might surprise you with something credible. Clark returned to his office and sat at his desk. His chair let out a sigh. I checked the missing persons reports for the city and county during the last 48 hours just to be sure. Nothing popped. I went back to my cleaning. At 5 o'clock, I slung my purse over my shoulder, nodded with approval at my sparkling clean and organized desk, and packed up to go home. My workday always exceeded 9 hours, and that was on a good day. When we had real cases to work on, 15-hour days weren't unheard of. I was going to take advantage of the opportunities to go home on time when I could. Night, guys. See you in the morning. I bundled up and looked toward the sky as I walked to my car. Puffy gray clouds against the darkening palette reminded me of the cold months that lay ahead. The short winter days and bone-chilling nights were right around the corner. Chapter 4. Kate. Kate tossed and turned throughout the night. Her sleep was fitful, interrupted with horrific nightmares. A man appeared, relentless in his pursuit and hungry to kill. His eyes were dark, beady, and full of malice. He chased a woman and never tired. She'd hide and he'd find her. Her screams went unanswered as she cried out for help. Once again, Kate woke, soaking wet and gasping. She reached for her neck to make sure she wasn't bleeding, then turned toward the clock. 2:57 a.m. With a reach across the bed, she twisted the knob on the milk glass nightstand lamp and illuminated the room. She rubbed her temples, then got up. For the second time in 2 nights, Kate stripped the wet pillowcase from the pillow and replaced it with a dry one. She opened the 3rd drawer of her dresser and pulled out a clean flannel nightgown and slipped it over her head. In the kitchen, Kate opened the bottom cabinet and pulled out the tea kettle, filled it with filtered water from the refrigerator, and set it on the stove. She turned the burner to the highest flame, opened the box of Sleepy Night tea, and placed 1 tea bag in a waiting cup. Her fingers instinctively went to her neck. She touched those raised scars, and a rush of memories came back. Why was she dreaming of him again? It had been years since that night. 10 years, to be exact. She pulled the calendar off the wall and checked. 10 years to the week since he randomly attacked her and tried to end her life. Her mind took her back to that fall night, a night impossible to forget. If only she hadn't decided to walk home from the bar alone. Her apartment was close, only a few blocks away, but they were the longest blocks of her life. He appeared out of nowhere with a knife. She tried to fight him off, but he was strong and vicious. Robert Lynch tried to kill her and nearly succeeded. She had the scars to prove it. She wondered if these recent dreams manifested themselves because of her anxiety about his upcoming release, or if they were actual premonitions. As a psychic that had worked with law enforcement in the past, Kate felt an obligation to report her dreams to the local authorities, even though they dismissed her as unbelievable. In the morning, she would call the prison in Atlanta. She knew he was due to be paroled in a few days. She drank her tea and reluctantly went back to bed, hoping for sleep. After a restless night, Kate woke to a seemingly normal morning. She sat at the small 2-person table wedged in the corner between the kitchen and living room and looked over the notes she had written 4 hours earlier. The violent dreams she'd had lately weren't typical, and they shook her to the core. With his description written on paper, she knew the man in last night's dream wasn't Robert, or at least the man wasn't how she remembered him looking. She flipped the page back to the entry from the morning before and realized the man's description was the same in both dreams. Although the dreams represented the nightmare she had lived through when she was 23, maybe the dreams weren't about her after all. She wondered if there actually was a killer out there now committing those same types of crimes against innocent women. In the bathroom, she lingered in the shower. The hot spray pelleted her back and relaxed her knotted shoulders. A bowl of cereal was plenty for breakfast. She had somewhere to be. If a face-to-face with Sergeant Monroe was the only way to get her attention, that was what Kate intended to do. Chapter 5. "What you doing?" I asked. Amber sat at the breakfast bar, her hand a flurry of motion as she wrote. I leaned over her shoulder and took a look. "You're planning the Thanksgiving dinner menu already?" "Of course I am. It's only 10 days away. I want to make everyone happy, meaning Dad has to tell me his favorite side dishes, and so do you. Is anyone else coming over?" "Not that I've planned, unless you want to go all out and have a real family turkey day." Amber smirked. "If you mean having Dad and Bruce together at the table, I'll pass. Dad knows how much Bruce creeps me out. Or do you want to invite Lance and Cassie, your ex and his girlfriend, to spend the day with us? Maybe all of them?" "Yeah, I don't think so. How about you, me, and Dad? Easy peasy, right? We can have the usual fare, turkey, stuffing, and pie. That sounds perfect to me." "I'm still going to call Dad and see what his favorite sides are. I can't wait until he's here. I'm going to pick his brain about everything related to law enforcement." I laughed. I'm right here. You can pick my brain whenever you want. Anyway, shouldn't you be getting ready for school?" I glanced at the clock on the microwave. "Yeah, in a second. I have to feed Spaz. Thanks so much for putting up that outdoor pen for him." I watched fondly as my sister stroked her beloved cat. "He's really come around, don't you think?" She grinned. "Yep, and we aren't going to go through that again, are we, Spaz? You're such a naughty cat." The cat purred and rubbed against Amber's leg. I headed down the hallway, entered my bathroom, and turned on the shower. As the water heated, I picked out my wardrobe for the day. 40 minutes later, I called out to Amber as I packed my necessities, filled my travel mug with coffee, and headed to the garage. "See you later, sis." Her response echoed down the hallway, even though I couldn't make out her words. I assumed the gibberish was Amber saying goodbye and making sure Spaz was indoors. The meow coming from the living room told me he was safe and secure on the couch. I closed the kitchen door tightly behind me and grumbled as I got into my Mustang and cranked the heater up to the highest setting. I backed down the driveway and sped away. Thoughts of next spring and the type of flowers I would plant near the woods popped into my head. I imagined a new patio set, too, and chairs that had thick floral cushions. The image made me smile until I saw tiny flakes of snow hit the windshield of my car. Maybe I'd pick my dad's brain, too, but not about law enforcement. I wondered what it would feel like to live somewhere with 12 months of summer. The San Bernardino area sounded really good, especially this time of year. I pulled into the parking lot, killed the engine, and entered the sheriff's department. Jan was already sipping her morning brew, and it smelled delicious. I noticed a bud vase on the counter. A single red rose stood elegantly in the slender glass tube. "What's that about?" I grinned when Jan blushed. "I had a date last night, that's all. I'm not making a big deal about it yet." "Well, in my opinion, he's on the right track. Make the woman feel special right out of the gate. You'll keep me posted?" A wide grin spread across Jan's face. "Of course I will." We exchanged our usual morning gossip and talked about the cold morning. Then I tapped the code into the security door and entered the bullpen. I dumped my purse off at my desk and hung my coat in the closet. Jameson and Horbeck updated me on the overnight activities. They had nothing much to report other than checking on an alarm that went off at Sutter Auto Mall and a domestic disturbance just outside Jackson City that several of our deputies took care of. The night had been quiet, they said, and I was thankful for that. Jack entered the bullpen at 8 o'clock, and I had to do a double take. He gave me the "sorry, partner" expression when I noticed who followed him in. Kate Pierce was right on his heels. I felt my face flush red-hot as I stood. I'd nipped this unexpected visit in the bud before she had the time to consume my morning. Everyone stopped what they were doing, including the lieutenant, and watched to see how I'd handle her. "Kate, what can I do for you?" I was sure my voice sounded agitated. The anxiety I saw in her eyes softened me for a split second. She appeared to be deeply concerned about something. If you could give me a few minutes of your time, please." I sighed and let the breath out slowly. "Fine. Follow me. We'll go into the conference room." I didn't offer her coffee. I had no intention of letting her get too comfortable. With my cup in hand, I led the way down the hall. "In here." I opened the door and pointed at a chair. I sat at the opposite side of the table and looked her in the eyes. I drummed my fingertips impatiently as I watched her remove her coat, hang it on the chair back, and take a seat. "Kate, why does this dream have you all spun up?" "There have actually been nightmares 2 nights in a row, and this is why they bother me so much." She took a deep breath, untied the silk scarf double wrapped around her neck, and nodded in the front, then let it drop to the table. Tears clouded her eyes as she looked into mine. I couldn't find my voice as I stared at her neck. In an instant, I felt sorry and stunned at the same time. The thick double scar that covered the width of her neck startled me beyond words. The scars were red, ragged, and from their appearance, the result of a vicious attack. "Oh my God, Kate. How did this happen to you?" I rose and closed the conference room door, then opened the supply closet and pulled out a box of tissue. I set it on the table in front of her. Even though for the last several years I'd thought I disliked this woman, I never had a legitimate reason to. All I knew about her was that she worked as a psychic, and in my closed-minded opinion, that was reason enough to think she was nuts. We'd never had a real conversation. We never talked about our personal lives or even exchanged pleasantries. I wasn't on the welcoming committee when she moved to North Bend. I didn't know her story, and according to the scars, she had a horrific one to tell. I didn't know a damn thing about her other than my own smart-mouthed skepticism regarding her occupation. Now I felt like a total jerk. Even though Kate looked to be my age, I felt like a mother comforting a child in that moment. Instinctively, I reached across the table and took her hand in mine. I felt the sting of tears fill my own eyes. "Do you want to tell me what this is really about?" She nodded. "How about something to drink before we begin?" She smiled weakly. "Tea sounds nice." "Okay, stay put. I'll be right back." I got up, walked out, and closed the door behind me. As I turned from the hallway into the bullpen, the conversation stopped, and my colleague stared at me. Clayton grinned. "Got rid of her already? Damn, that's a record even for you. I bet you weren't in there more than 5 minutes. I cleared my throat and dabbed at my eyes. I put a cup of water in the microwave, then turned toward them. "Yeah, guess I'm the jerk of the year. This woman has a real story to tell me, and I've never given her the time of day." Jack stopped what he was doing and spoke up. "What's going on? Is she okay?" The microwave beeped, and I pulled out the cup of hot water. I grabbed the basket of tea samples and sugar packets, then placed them on a tray along with a cup of coffee for me. "This might take a while. I'll let you guys know what's going on once I hear her story." I gave them a solemn look and turned toward the hallway. From what I've seen so far, it isn't going to be anything good. Chapter 6. "And that happened 10 years ago?" I shook my head in disbelief as Kate told me her harrowing story. Now I understood why she'd moved away from the South. Anywhere in the Atlanta area was too close to Robert Lynch's family and friends. They'd come looking for her. According to Kate, Robert's last words to her before he was sentenced were that she'd pay in the end. Now he was due to be released from USP Atlanta in a few days. She went on to say his upcoming release might have triggered the nightmares, but she had a deep feeling that they were real premonitions. I explained to Kate how I'd done a county-wide search in the missing persons database over the last 48 hours and found that nobody had been reported missing. What if the woman wasn't local? She could have been from a neighboring county. That's true, but then our hands would be tied in Washburn County. It wouldn't be our jurisdiction, and we couldn't do anything at the county level. If a crime crosses county borders, the state police would become involved. Then, of course, across state borders would be the FBI's case. The thing is, I thought I was reliving my own nightmares until I looked at the descriptions I had jotted down. The killer doesn't look like Robert, and neither of the women in the dreams looked like me. I wrote down the information about Robert Lynch. I wanted to check this man out for myself. Have you seen him at all since he went to prison? No. I imagine his appearance has changed in the last 10 years, but I'm sure the man in my dreams wasn't him. That man was hairy and bigger than how I remember Robert. I could get my hands on a recent picture of him if you want to be certain. People sometimes change dramatically in prison. Guys work out a lot and can get pretty big. That could help, but the thought of seeing him again, even in a photo, unnerves me. Tell me more about the dreams and the descriptions of the women. Okay. Like I wrote in the email, the first woman was blonde and young, maybe early 20s. The second woman was petite with red hair. She looked to be in her 40s. She wore a locket on a delicate gold chain. Dan was engraved across it, possibly a boyfriend or husband's name. I remember how terrified she was. She hid from him throughout the dream. He'd find her, and she'd run again. I remember hearing trains. Trains? I wrote that down. Yes, then the chase continued, but I'm not sure how it turned out. I woke up before the dream ended. You mean before she was killed? Yes. Then I went into another dream that took place in a town setting. Several garbage cans stood against the walls of a dark, narrow area around older brick buildings. Could it have been an industrial area or a warehouse, maybe? Was there anything familiar about the buildings? Did you recognize the street or any houses in the neighborhood? Was there anything about the town that stood out? Kate buried her face in her hands. I don't know. It was vague, hazy in a way. There was a blue dumpster with graffiti on the side. I remember that. The first dream was much more vivid. Okay, let's focus on that one then. I pushed back my chair and excused myself. I'll fill our cups. There's a ladies' room at the end of the hall if you need it. She nodded a thank you, and I walked out with her teacup and my mug in hand. When I returned with the hot beverages, I took a seat on her side of the table. Kate unzipped the black, soft-side briefcase she had lying on the chair next to her and pulled out a yellow legal pad. She showed me what she had written down, even though she had previously emailed me the details. She said she added more memories of the first dream than what she had originally sent. The woman's hair was in a ponytail. It was long enough that she could pull it around her face. I remember seeing her twist it nervously. Kate took a sip of tea and swallowed, then paused as if she were deep in thought. I waited silently for a minute so I wouldn't interrupt her thoughts. Okay, what else? She wore a turquoise and silver ring on her right index finger, and she had brightly painted acrylic nails, coral-colored, I think. She wore a pink fleece jacket that had an emblem on the chest. Really? I wrote that down. Did you get a close look at the emblem? Yes, it was similar to a crest, like a gold crown in silk embroidery thread. And your email said her car was light-colored, and you thought it was a two-door with a hatchback? Yes, that's correct. I couldn't see the plates, though. Okay, and the second woman was an older redhead? Not old, but older than the first woman. And yes, a redhead. He chased her everywhere. But then, like I said, I woke up. I'm not even sure if the buildings and dumpster were a continuation of that dream or not. Do you think you can give a good enough description to a forensic artist to get pictures drawn of them? I could send them out to law enforcement across the country. We do that kind of thing all the time. Oh, yeah, I paused. You were going to say, except? I took in a long breath. Yeah, except we usually have an actual missing person first. Maybe we should wait on sending the sketches out. I'd still like to have drawings rendered as long as the images are fresh in your mind. I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself since I had no idea what to do with this information. I had never worked with a psychic in my life. Kate, how has this worked in the past cases you've helped with? I mean, did law enforcement call you in as a consultant, or did you have dreams and visions and contact them? Both. I'll admit there have been times where my visions haven't helped. I could have seen something real in my dreams, but the crimes weren't local to Nashville or Chicago.
I'm thinking you're leaning toward that theory. Our local database didn't show anyone missing, and nobody has called in on the hotline. Kate's furrowed brows showed defeat and anxiety as she studied her notes. The dreams were even more real than usual. But you admitted that Mr. Lynch's upcoming release may have triggered those dreams. I know. It's possible. Think hard, Kate. Is there anything about either woman that seems at all familiar to you? Somebody from your past, maybe? Could they be a distant relative, co-worker, somebody from the bank or grocery store? Kate pressed her temples and thought hard. No, neither of them seem familiar. I don't recognize either of them. Sergeant Monroe, I'd like you to go over my case history. I swear I'm not a nut. I want you to read the newspaper articles where I've helped find missing people and locate murder victims. She pulled a red folder out of the briefcase and handed it to me. Here. What's this? I asked. It's my validation. I want to assure you I'm not here to waste your time. Read it. Take it home and go over it. There's somebody out there slashing women's throats, or he's preparing to begin soon. How do you know, Kate? Sergeant? How do you know if he's going to commit a crime or already has? That's the sad part. Short of being the criminal myself, I don't have a name to give you, only a description. We usually find the victim after it's too late to warn them. Kate put the scarf around her neck and stood. She slipped her coat on and buttoned it. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Call me after you've gone over my files. Feel free to contact the police departments in Chicago and Nashville and discuss me with them. I know you think I've led you on a wild goose chase in the past. Not every prediction of mine leads to an arrest or a found body. But these dreams are different. I stood too and pushed in my chair. I understand. Give me several days to read this information, make a few calls, and think this over. Kate? Yes, Sergeant Monroe. Did you ever find out why Robert Lynch tried to kill you? He never said, but do psychopaths need a reason? I guess I was in the wrong place at the right time for him. She turned to the window and twisted the wand on the blinds. I watched her as she gazed out at the sky beyond the glass. Looks like we might get snow. You have my number, Sergeant Monroe. I hope to hear from you soon. Kate reached for her briefcase and walked out. I picked up the red folder she left behind on the conference table, then glanced down the hallway. She was already gone. Back in the bullpen, I dropped the folder on my desk and exhaled a loud, confused sigh when I sat. All eyes were on me. Well, what did Miss Nutjob have to say? Jack chuckled. There's a chance she isn't a nutjob after all. I found out she's lived through a pretty horrific experience. Clayton perked up. Okay, now you have our attention. What gives with her? Those nightmares, or premonitions, as she calls them, are about women having their throats slashed. Turns out 10 years ago she was attacked by a stranger who slit her throat. She showed me the scars, 2 jagged rows across her neck, ear to ear. No shit. I turned in my chair and looked behind me. Clark stood there, leaning against the open door of his office. Yeah, boss. No shit. Chapter 7. We were in luck and had a quiet month so far. No violent crimes that I was aware of had been committed in the last few weeks. We had been spending time closing out old cases and, of course, preparing for and testifying at the Mandy Blakely trial. The lull in action gave me the opportunity I needed to hunker down at my desk and dig into finding out who Robert Lynch really was and why he tried to kill Kate Pierce. I pulled up his police records and was surprised to see the amount of criminal activity he had been involved in. Robert Lynch was a career criminal that started his illegal habits as an enterprising teenager that sold drugs to school kids. As time went on and he became more brazen, his crimes escalated into numerous burglaries, aggravated assaults, 2 rape charges that didn't stick, and, finally, Kate's attempted murder.
Up until the attempted murder charge, he had racked up 6 years behind bars for a handful of different crimes. According to his statement logged in the police records, Kate Pierce was wrong, and it was a case of mistaken identity. He swore he wasn't her assailant and said he had a steadfast alibi. He admitted guilt only after 15 long hours of interrogation. He stated that the cops railroaded him into a false confession. Robert Lynch was known on the streets of Atlanta, along with his brother, Tony, and the thugs they associated with. Robert had a bad reputation, and according to his statement, the cops wanted him locked up no matter what. I read through everything that was available online, short of having his complete police jacket in front of me. His brother was his alibi the night of the attack, but with the type of people Robert ran with, that alibi didn't hold a lot of weight. Several days after Kate's attack, Robert had been picked up on an unrelated charge. The description Kate gave a sketch artist of her attacker looked too much like Robert to go unnoticed. The police picked him up and held him in custody on robbery charges while they built a case against him for attempted murder. Weeks later, after Kate was released from the hospital, she picked him out of a police lineup with no hesitation, and he was charged with her attempted murder. "Wow, that's quite a story," I said after reading the contents of the folder Kate had given me earlier and everything I could find online about the man. "Bad news?" Billings asked. "Oh yeah, he's a career criminal from the sound of it, and Kate happened to be the unlucky person in his path that night. He was sentenced to 15 years, but he's being released at 10 in a few days for good behavior and because of prison overcrowding. No wonder Kate is having nightmares. At least she lives far away from Atlanta now." I put my computer to sleep temporarily and got up from my desk. I stretched, cracked my neck, and headed out. Jack perked up when I walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" "To the lunchroom. I need my chocolate bar fix. Do you want something?" "Yeah, I'll have a bag of chips." I jerked my head toward the door. "Sure, come on, you can get your own." I looked back as Jack's smile soured, but he got up and joined me anyway. We stood at the vending machine, mulling over our choices. Jack fed a $5 bill through the slot and hit the button for corn chips. They fell to the bottom of the machine. I pulled his change out of the coin return and fed it back into the machine. He jerked his head at me and laughed. "Wow, you really suckered me into that one." "Sure did, partner." I pointed at my choice. "Go ahead and press A7. Dark chocolate, peanuts, and caramel, 3 of my favorite foods." I handed him the $2 bills that slid out of the paper money slot. I unwrapped the chocolate bar of decadence and bit into it while we walked the hallway back to the bullpen. Jack tore open his bag of chips and grabbed a handful. "So, what's next?" We returned to our desks, and I tossed my candy bar wrapper into the nearby garbage can. I regretted not having Jack by me, too. "As long as I have the time, I think I'll dig into Kate's psychic world a bit. I'm going to call the Chicago and Nashville police departments and get their take on her. As traumatic as her past is, I'm not completely sold on the premonition thing. Until I hear their stories of her uncanny, accurate predictions, I'm not believing everything written in the newspaper. If they give her an A+ rating, I'll do a statewide missing persons search for both women. Her description of the first woman is detailed, even down to what she was wearing." "And the second?" "I have height, hair color, and approximate age, but that's all. I'm thinking of having Marie work with Kate to see if she can put together facial sketches from her dream memories. It can't hurt. Somebody might actually know these women. They might be missing from another state. Meanwhile, the names of the detectives she worked side by side with in Nashville and Chicago are in the folder she gave me." Clayton bent his fingers back and cracked his knuckles. He peeked over the row of framed family pictures lined up on his desk. "How old are those cases?" I pulled the newspaper articles out and checked the dates. "It looks like she helped on 2 cases in Nashville 9 years back and another 7 years ago." I flipped to the Chicago articles. "The first one there goes back 6 years, and the other was from 3 years ago. I guess she hasn't helped law enforcement since." Billings smirked. "That's because she moved here and we aren't that gullible." I wasn't so sure anymore as I read them over for the second time.
Well, according to these news articles, she's the real deal. Hopefully the police she worked with are still on the force. I found a comfortable spot in my worn chair, looked up the Metro Police Department's phone number in Nashville, and dialed. I explained to the officer that answered the phone who I was and who I was hoping to speak to. She said Detective Amoroso was indeed still at that location, and she would transfer me to his phone. I thanked her and waited for a few brief seconds before a deep voice picked up, introducing himself as Detective Joe Amoroso. After making my own introduction, I told him why I was calling. Kate Pierce was living in North Bend and had been for the last 2 years. I explained to Detective Amoroso how she had confided in me about several disturbing nightmares of women being murdered. The dreams were very detailed, down to the clothing worn by one woman in particular. I wanted his opinion of Kate and whether I should take her premonition seriously.
Ah, yes, we remember her well. I'm not quite sure why Kate moved away, but it seemed like she was always looking over her shoulder, as if something bad was about to happen. I never asked about her personal life, but she reminded me of a tortured soul.
I understood what he meant now that Kate had explained her past to me.
I don't think she wanted to settle here for the long term anyway. She seemed a bit introverted. Nashville is a party town, but she was very helpful to us on several cases.
Well, that's why I'm calling. I'd like your opinion of her work.
Kate certainly has a gift. It's amazing how some people are that fortunate. Although I've heard others call it a curse.
That's what you consider it? A gift? He laughed into the phone.
You sound like a skeptic, Sergeant Monroe.
I felt my face blush, but admitted he was right. Detective Amoroso excused himself, and I heard him talking to someone in the background. He returned to the phone a few seconds later.
Sorry about that. We just got another missing persons call. I wouldn't mind having Kate back here right now. It seems like these kind of cases never have happy endings.
Unfortunately, you're right. Detective Amoroso continued.
Anyway, her visions didn't work out all the time, but I'd say in 3 out of 5 cases they did. She was instrumental in helping us find an abducted child. That was one case that did have a happy ending. She helped us locate a missing woman that was unfortunately found murdered. On another case, she actually tracked down the perpetrator that was beating and raping college girls. He's still behind bars. If you give her the tools she needs and actually believe in her capabilities, you'll be surprised. I can't explain her gift, but she has proven herself to us, and I wish she would have stayed in our community.
He chuckled.
We even had a nickname for her.
Really? Which was?
We called her our psychic investigator. Give her a chance, Sergeant. She may have a valid concern.
I thanked Detective Amoroso and hung up. The next call was to the lead detective at the Chicago Violent Crimes Division, a Detective Bill Branson. His account of Kate was very similar to Detective Amoroso's. Kate had been a big help in the cases she'd assisted them with. I hung up with a sense of relief and a certain amount of anxiety. If her visions were accurate, there was a dangerous person out there who had already committed vicious crimes, or was about to. We just didn't know the who, where, or when. Chapter 8. I went home that night with Kate Pierce weighing heavily on my mind. I wasn't sure whether working with her would be like opening an enormous can of worms or not. If I gave her the go-ahead, we could possibly be spending our days chasing down every shadowy figure in her dream world. Had the crimes in her nightmares actually been committed? And if they hadn't, there wasn't a way to prevent them anyway. We didn't have a perpetrator to go after. I wasn't going to let Kate Pierce take the lead in our investigations. Want a glass of wine? Amber closed the dishwasher after stacking the dinner dishes inside. She stood at the counter and poured a glass for herself. She waited, the bottle suspended in her hand, to pour a second glass. I stared at her, but hadn't heard a word she'd said.
Hello, Earth to Jade. Is anyone home in that head of yours?
Sorry, I have a lot of thinking to do. What did you say?
I asked if you wanted a glass of wine, but never mind, I poured you one anyway. Here. Carrying 2 glasses of Chardonnay, Amber walked around the breakfast bar and handed one to me.
Thinking about the Mandy Blakely case? No, that'll go on for another week before they wrap things up. I might sit in on more of the trial, though, since work has been relatively quiet. Dean's sister from Medford and the minister from Madison are going to be testifying sometime this week. I took a sip and gave Spaz a thorough 3-minute scratch behind his ears. He purred as he lay curled between Amber and me on the couch. I wish they'd just finish things and put her in an institution where she belongs. They can't bring back the dead, and the media is on a feeding frenzy about this case like a herd of piranhas. Amber chuckled. I think they'd be called a school of piranhas, but I get your drift. So what's bothering you? Have I ever mentioned Kate Pierce to you? You mean the local psychic? Yeah, that's the one. I'm not quite sure how to handle her. Nashville and Chicago police departments tell me she's legit and has been helpful on some of their cases. Amber stretched her long legs out across the coffee table. Okay, so what's the problem? We don't have a case to bring her in on. She's bringing her cases to us. What does that even mean? She's having dreams of violent crimes and wants us to do something about them. But we have nowhere to go. We don't have any victim or perp names to start the process with. Do you want my take on things? I grinned and picked up my wine glass from the end table. Absolutely. Go ahead and do your psychology criminal justice thing on me. I snuggled deeper into the couch cushions and waited. You have no victim, no location, and no perp. There's really nothing anyone can do with that information because there isn't any. Once there's a case to work on, call her in and see how she does. You can't solve a case that hasn't happened. What do you think of psychics? Do you believe they actually have merit? Amber shrugged. The cops in Nashville and Chicago do. There are some things that common logic can't explain, Jade. Damn, I'd love to have that ability. Really? Hell yeah. Could you imagine being an FBI profiler and having psychic powers, too? Man, I'd rock the law enforcement world. I laughed. Leave it to you. Anyway, what do you think of having a sketch artist render pictures from Kate's dreams? Amber appeared to ponder that bit of information. That may not be a half-bad idea, but what would you do with them? I'll enter their descriptions on the National Unidentified Persons Database and narrow down the search by approximate height, weight, age, and hair color and see if anything pops. Better yet, I'll bring Kate in and have her go through the photos herself. If she finds someone that looks like the ladies in her dreams, we might have something to work with. This could be my only opportunity to see if Kate's premonitions are real. I have enough free time to dig into this now, but if a real case comes up, it would have to take precedence, and Kate's stuff would go on the back burner. I went to bed that night with a plan of action. In the morning, I'd call Marie, the sketch artist, and have her sit down with Kate and come up with real faces to go forward with. Chapter 9. 1 piece of peanut butter toast and a single cup of coffee was enough for me. I was anxious to get to work and get busy. Kate would have to prove herself to me before I'd become a believer, but my mind was gradually opening up to the possibilities. I fed and watered Polly and Porky, gave them each a kiss, and headed to the door with my travel mug in hand. I yelled out a goodbye to Amber as I hit the garage door opener and left. I passed the bank clock, then checked the time in my car. They matched, and I gave the dashboard an attaboy pat. Billings and Clayton pulled into the parking lot right behind me, and we walked into the bullpen together. With my coat hung and my purse and gun at my desk, I sat and listened as Horbeck and Jameson updated us on the overnight activities. Jack walked in at 7:30, surprising all of us. With a fresh cup of coffee on my desk and everything I'd needed within reach, I dialed Kate Pierce's phone number. Hello? The voice on the other end sounded like Kate's, although raspy and groggy. Kate, it's Jade Monroe. What's wrong? You sound awful. I waited for her response and heard her clear her throat. Sergeant Monroe, hang on, please. I need a glass of water. She returned to the phone a few seconds later. Sorry, I had a terrible night. Bad dreams? Horrible ones. I called the prison yesterday and they confirmed Robert's release. He's being paroled today. I guess that prompted the non-stop nightmares last night. Did you get any sleep at all, as in restful sleep? She groaned through the phone line. I don't feel like I did. Anyway, what can I do for you? It must be important for you to call this early. I'm sorry, Kate. I wouldn't have called if I'd known you didn't get any sleep. No worries, I'll live. I'd like to run something past you. Are you able to come down to the station this morning and talk? Sure thing. I'll be there in an hour. I clicked off and called Marie Ashton, the sketch artist who worked with law enforcement in North Bend. She agreed to come in at 9 o'clock and try to put Kate Pierce's dream faces on paper. At 8:30, Jan called my desk phone and said Kate had arrived. I ushered Kate through the bullpen door, where she greeted my colleagues. At the beverage station, I offered her a choice of coffee or tea. She decided on spearmint tea, so I made 2 cups. Something different now and then couldn't hurt. Let's have a seat in the conference room. I glanced at the clock above the door. Marie was scheduled to arrive in a half hour. That would give me enough time to explain to Kate what I had in mind and hear the details of her latest nightmares. I grabbed a folder off my desk and jammed my cell phone into my pocket, then led the way down the hall. We entered the conference room, and I closed the door at my back. Kate sat on the 3rd chair on the left. I closed the blinds and took a seat across from her. Do you want to talk about your dreams from last night? Kate sighed, as if even talking about them would zap every ounce of her energy. That's okay, we don't have to. I just thought. I know, she said. You thought I'd be gushing about my dreams and sending you on a wild goose chase again. I kept silent. If she wanted to tell me, she could, and if not, so be it. I'm sorry, I snapped. I'm just exhausted. I dreamed about Robert, of course. This time it actually was him, and he found out where I lived. He came after me, and... And what? And he caught and killed me. I saw tears spring up in Kate's eyes, and I felt her pain. She was scared to death of this man. What did he look like, Kate? Was he exactly as you remembered him, or had he aged in 10 years? She squeezed her head between her open palms as if she needed to keep it from falling apart. His features were familiar, except older-looking, of course. His temples were graying, and his hair was buzz-cut. He had prison tats, too. He didn't have tats 10 years ago? Nothing that was visible. Could you make out what they were? I opened the folder as she closed her eyes. I hadn't told Kate about the current photo of Robert Lynch I had printed out from the USP Atlanta inmate registry. Her eyes opened, and I could see she remembered. He had the word revenge on the back of his right hand, and 2 teardrops under his right eye. Can you describe them? Just that they were small, tattooed tears, and the word revenge was in block letters. They were done in dark ink. I wrote the descriptions she gave of him and his tattoos in my notepad. I knew most prison tats were done in black or dark blue ink. They weren't given the luxury of colored ink in most penitentiaries. And you said you haven't physically seen him or a picture of him in 10 years? No, I'd rather forget that face forever. So you don't want to see what he looks like now? Are you going to make me? Of course not. I could barely contain myself as I closed the folder. Would you like another cup of tea? Sure, if you're making one for yourself. Okay, I'll be right back. I picked up the folder and our cups and left the room. Jack looked up from his desk when I entered the bullpen. What gives? You're as white as a ghost. Clark walked out of his office, pulled out my guest chair, and sat. Billings and Clayton stopped filing reports and stared at me. I shook my head in disbelief. How is this possible? Take a breath, Jade. What's going on? Clark asked. She just gave me a description of Robert Lynch from the nightmare she had of him last night. He's being released today, and she thinks that anxiety led to the dreams. Jack scratched the back of his hand. And she didn't know I printed out a recent photograph of him from the USP Atlanta inmate registry. Her description was dead on. But she doesn't have access to that list, Clayton said. Exactly my point. She actually is a psychic. I opened the folder and showed the guys the printout. Clark stared at the photograph. You do know what those teardrop tats signify, don't you, Jade?
I nodded. The outlined tattoo means attempted murder, and the filled-in one means he has actually killed someone.
But his record doesn't show any accusation or arrest for murder, Jack said.
I filled our teacups and headed toward the hallway. There might be a lot more to Robert Lynch than we actually know. Chapter 10. I had 5 minutes left to explain my plan to Kate before Marie was scheduled to arrive. I placed the tea on the conference room table and apologized for taking so long. So here's what I'd like to do, Kate, if you're on board. Our sketch artist will be here in a few minutes, and I want to get the images of those 2 women on paper before they start fading from your memory. Soon they could be nothing more than dream characters with red or blonde hair. We need to preserve everything you can remember about their features. Kate leaned in with curiosity. But then what? Then I have a job for you. I'll show you how to use the Nationwide Unidentified Persons Database instead of the Missing Persons Database. That way we can enter their names as Jane Doe, since we don't actually know who we're looking for. All I need is for you to find faces that match as closely as possible to the sketches Marie will draw. It's a way to narrow down our pool of potential women. Are you willing to do that? Absolutely. A knock sounded on the door, and I got up to answer it. Marie greeted me and walked in with her satchel of supplies. I made the introductions, explained to Marie what we needed, and excused myself. I'd let those 2 work together and do what they did best, without any interruptions from me. Just let me know when you're finished. I'll be in the bullpen. Jack rose when I walked in.
Want to tag along? I'm caught up on my paperwork for the week.
Going to sit in on Mandy's trial?
Yep. Today the owner of Unhappily Hitched, Inc. has to testify about his confidential client list. That ought to stir the pot with plenty of people.
Sounds interesting, but I better pass. I want to be here when Marie and Kate finish up. Jack nodded and exited the room. It seemed as though I was glancing at the clock every half hour. Patience wasn't my strongest trait. I drummed my fingers on my desk, then got up and poured a cup of coffee for Billings, Clayton, Clark, and myself, and went back to fidgeting.
So what do you make of Kate Pierce now, after that description of Lynch? Billings asked.
I don't know. I've never put much credence in psychics, and her visions baffle me. Detective Amoroso in Nashville calls it a gift. What I don't understand is, does she see things that have already happened, or is she predicting things to come?
Pick her brain, Jade, and find out. She might come in handy once in a while, just like Marie does.
Good idea, Adam. I will for sure. At 10:30, I heard a set of footsteps walking toward the bullpen. They were finally finished. I rose from my desk when Marie peeked around the corner. I think we're done, Jade. Would you like to come back and take a look? Sure thing. I walked with Marie back to the conference room and took the same seat I had sat in earlier. Several open books containing female facial features, as well as partial pencil sketches on white drawing paper, lay scattered across the table. Wow, you've been busy. 2 completed sketches on paper lay in front of Kate. She stared down at them. It's weird, you know? What is, Kate? How my dreams are now real. These ladies actually exist somewhere. May I? Kate slid the drawings across the table toward me. I studied them and saw how the blonde woman was far more detailed than the redhead. I don't know if we can get a positive ID on her. I tapped on the drawing of the redhead. You did say the woman moved around a lot and was in the shadows most of the time, but we'll do the best we can. These sketches are pretty remarkable, and they're as close as you remember in your dreams. The blonde woman is exactly how I remember her. That's good, really good. I stood and thanked Marie for her help. She closed the door at her back and left. You look spent, I said to Kate. Want to take a break? We can grab a snack in the lunchroom. I think you need a caffeine jolt, too. That's a great idea. We walked down the hallway to the lunchroom and studied the contents of the sandwich vending machine. We agreed on 2 turkey wraps that still looked edible. I slid in a 5, pressed B2, and the sandwiches dropped to the door at the bottom. I pressed E4 and 2 bags of chips followed.
The small 6-cup brew station pumped out the coffee while we talked quietly over our food. We were the only people in the lunchroom, and the privacy was nice. I needed to know more about Kate Pierce. I was intrigued. I listened closely as she answered every question I threw at her. I heard the lingering southern drawl when she spoke. I had always thought of Kate as pretty from a distance, with her curly black locks, but I never studied her features. I chalked it up to me never giving her more than 5 minutes of my time. She had strikingly pale blue eyes, almost icy, yet beautiful. Her skin was porcelain white. She mustn't be a sun worshipper like me. She was tall and slender. The word willowy came to mind. I wondered if she had any friends, if she ever did anything that wasn't work-related. I'd seen her at the summer village picnics in her psychic tent doing personal readings, but what did she do in her downtime? I couldn't fathom a life spent alone with the only company being the victims in her nightmares. Did you grow up in Atlanta, Kate? Is your family there? My mom is. My dad left us when I was young, and I don't really remember much about him. Faint images of him pop into my head now and then. I have an older sister that lives in Portland. Maine or Oregon? She smiled. Oregon. Too bad that's so far away. It's okay. We aren't close and haven't kept in touch. She thinks I'm a wacko. Her words stung. I had thought the same thing for the last 2 years. So where do you live? Downtown in an efficiency apartment above Myers Hardware. I groaned. Does old man Myers even heat that building? Kate chuckled. Barely. I swear in the dead of winter I can take an ice scraper to the north windows. I've learned to put plastic over them. We both laughed. I was beginning to like this woman. So what really happened that night 10 years ago? I got up and poured 2 cups of coffee, then returned to the lunch table. I live near the Atlanta Technical College, where I went to school. My friends and I were out on a Friday night, our typical routine. Charlie's was a fun dive bar on a busy corner. There was always action around there, and I knew the neighborhood well. I felt safe. I watched Kate's expression go to a dark place. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. It's okay. Take your time. She nodded and cleared her throat. Anyway, I decided to go home a little earlier than the rest of my friends. We normally stayed out until closing, but I had a headache that night. Against everyone's protests, I left alone. My apartment was only a few blocks away. The streets were well lit until you reached the apartment complex. There, the winding brick sidewalks through the trees looked charming and peaceful during the day, but at night it was dark and shadowy. I could see my building straight ahead on the right. I had a ground floor unit, and each apartment had a dusk-to-dawn porch light for safety. They were all illuminated, but I never made it that far. I handed Kate a stack of napkins from the dispenser on the table. Tears that seemed to have horrible memories attached to them slid down her cheeks. She dabbed her eyes and thanked me, then continued on. Around the last curve of the sidewalk, and only 50 feet from the building, he sprung out of nowhere. Being close to the apartments like that cast enough ambient light to see his face. There had been a few rapes in previous months throughout Atlanta, and I'm sure that was his intent. He began ripping at my clothes, but I struggled with him and fought hard. I began to scream, so he covered my mouth with his stinky hand. Describe stinky to me. His hands smelled like cigarettes and grime, like he hadn't washed them in ages. Anyway, I don't think he was expecting someone to fight back so fiercely. Lights were coming on in the apartments from the noise, so instead of raping me, he slit my throat twice. I fell to the ground, bleeding profusely, while trying to hold my throat together. I saw him run into the darkness. Then everything became foggy, and I passed out. I can't believe you survived that. It was horrible luck and good luck at the same time. Horrible that it even happened, but good that he didn't hit my carotid artery either time. I would have bled out in seconds otherwise. The next thing I knew, it was the following afternoon. I was in ICU at Northside Hospital, and my mom was sitting next to my bed.
What did the police say at your hospital interview?
Kate took a sip of coffee and made a face. Yuck, this is cold. Hang on to your thought, I'll warm these up. I got up and carried the cups back to the counter and topped both of them off. I placed them in the microwave for 30 seconds, flipped the switch to turn off the coffee maker, and returned to the table with 2 piping hot coffees. Okay, go ahead. Thanks. Anyway, the cops told me what I expected. They interviewed every apartment resident facing that side of the complex. Nobody actually saw the man except me. The residents only heard my screams. I guess a few of them ran outside and called 911 as soon as they saw my condition. The cops had their forensic team out there, but they didn't find any trace evidence.
Not even under your nails?
I didn't have any nails. I bite them off. All they had to go on was my description of him, and that didn't come right away. I think I was in shock for a while. I finally had a nightmare of the attack and saw his face again. That's when they brought in a sketch artist to work with me.
Do you think he's going to come after me, Sergeant, now that he's free? I don't want to make you unnecessarily fearful, but he could track you as far as Chicago if he really wanted to. Even though you moved away from Atlanta, you never changed your name. I thought about the newspaper clippings and my online search. Keep in mind those newspaper articles written about how you've helped the Nashville and Chicago police departments were flattering, but it was a way to track your location, too. It was public information easily found on the internet. I did it, and anyone else can, too. Maybe it's a good thing we never pulled you in on a case. You've had no publicity in Wisconsin. Chapter 11. So, are you up for starting the unidentified persons search today? The analog clock on the lunchroom wall showed it was 11:45. I have a private reading at 1 o'clock, Kate said, but I could come back later. That would be great. We can get started this afternoon and see if anything pans out. From the expression on Kate's face, it looked as though she had more to say. Is there something else on your mind? Actually, there is. I want to thank you, Sergeant Monroe, for finally believing in me. She smiled. It took a while. What changed your mind? I hesitated, not knowing whether it was wise or not to show her Robert Lynch's current photograph. It would prove her psychic abilities were right on and her dreams had real significance, but she said she didn't want to see it. There were also the teardrop tattoos. I didn't want to frighten her even more if she asked what they meant. Whether or not Robert Lynch actually murdered someone before he went to prison would be hard to find out, and I didn't want that weighing on Kate's mind. I spoke with the detectives in Nashville and Chicago that worked with you years ago. They gave you high praises and said you were the real deal. I respect their opinions. I believe it's time I opened up my mind a bit. Oh, one more thing, Kate. Yes, Sergeant. Please, call me Jade. It isn't necessary to be formal with me. She smiled widely. Okay. Should I call you when I'm ready to come back? Yep, that's perfect. I'll show you how to use the database, and we'll see if anything shakes out. I escorted Kate to the vestibule at the front of the building and watched as she walked to her car. She turned back and waved goodbye. Back in the bullpen, I had a call come in on my desk phone from Jack at the courthouse. He said there was a big commotion at the Mandy Blakely trial. Did they already break for lunch? What's going on? I looked at the clock. 12:05. I had just put on my coat and was on my way out to run some errands when Jack called. Nah, this started about 20 minutes ago, but it's escalating quickly. I think we're going to need to escort a few people to jail. Apparently, Whitney Smith went crazy and attacked the owner of Unhappily Hitched, Inc. when he was called to testify. She jumped on Mandy, too, and broke her nose. You're kidding, right? Wish I was. They've already cleared the courtroom, and everyone is in an uproar. People are out in the hallway, screaming and shoving each other, and the media is loving every second of it.
We need you guys over here to lend a hand. The ambulance is loading Mandy up to take her to St. Joe's. 2 deputies are there to escort her, but she's begging for you."
"Oh, for Pete's sake. Okay, hang tight. We're on our way." I clicked off. "Sorry, guys. It looks like your lunch break is going to have to wait. There's a brawl at the courthouse. Jack needs us." Clark hung up the phone and came out of his office.
"I was just informed, too. Let's go."
I strapped on my shoulder holster, and Billings, Clayton, and Clark did the same. We took off out the door and told Jen where we were going. Walking would have been faster, but we needed the cruisers in case we had to transport unruly people to the jail. We parked behind the courthouse and entered on the ground level, then took the back staircase to the 2nd floor. When we opened the stairwell door, the scene in front of us was surprising. The mob of people that had been jam-packed in the courtroom was now out in the hallway and creating quite a disturbance. Family members of the victims were at each other's throats, blaming everyone that looked as though they deserved to be yelled at. The religious zealots in the middle of the mayhem had their say, declaring that the owner of Unhappily Hitched, Inc. was destined to hell and deserved the punches Whitney Smith laid on him before the deputies pulled her off. Every spectator spewed their hatred for Dean's extended family, Mandy, the owner of the Cheaters website, and every man or woman that had ever accessed it. I saw Jack at the opposite end of the hallway with 3 deputies. 4 people sat side by side on a bench next to them with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. He waved us over. I called out to him. "What do you need us to do, partner?" "Get these people out of here. We've got 6 more that were throwing punches in cuffs. They're against that side wall. Seems that everyone has an opinion about this case. Mandy is gone, Whitney Smith is with an officer in a back room behind the judge's chambers, and Mr. Jacobs, the owner of Unhappily Hitched, Inc., is in the courtroom with another police officer. We need to disperse this crowd and shut down the floor. The other courtrooms have already been emptied. Some of these people are spillover that took it upon themselves to get involved. We need the media out of here, too. They're just fueling the fire." I nodded that I heard him through the noise. "Got it." I turned to Adam. "Billings, call John and tell him to get a bus over here. There are too many people to put in the cruisers. Clayton, have those officers escort Whitney and Mr. Jacobs over to a holding cell for now. We'll deal with them later. Boss, do you want me to go to St. Joe's or help clear the floor?" I saw Clark wave down Lieutenant Colbert from the North Bend PD. "Go ahead, Jade. Between the city boys and our guys, we can handle this." I pushed my way over to Jack. "I'm heading to St. Joe's to check on Mandy. Once the doctor gives her the okay to leave, I'll drive her back myself." "Okay, keep me posted." I took the 2 flights down the stairway and exited the back door. I called Kate Pierce as I drove and postponed our online unidentified persons search until tomorrow. It was only a 10-minute drive to St. Joseph's Community Hospital on the southern outskirts of North Bend. The campus was a beautiful place, with the hospital and hospice center only 6 years old. The staff was friendly and warm, and they knew me well. I entered and approached the reception counter. "Hello, Sergeant Monroe. What can I help you with?" "Hi, Liz. I'm here on official business. A couple of deputies brought Mandy Blakely in less than a half hour ago. She was involved in a scuffle, and I've heard she has a broken nose. Where can I find her?" "Yeah, she's in emergency in one of the cubicles in the east hallway. I'll take you back." "Thanks. How are the kids?" Liz's eyes lit up. "Oh, they're fine and growing like weeds." "I bet they are. Behaving?" She laughed. "Do 6- and 8-year-olds behave?" "Yeah, I guess you got me there. Haven't had any yet." "Here we are." She pointed down the hallway. "Mandy is in the 2nd room on the left." "Thanks, Liz. Take care." I approached the deputies that were sitting in the hallway by the sliding glass doors to Mandy's room. "Lincoln, Gates, how's she doing?" They both stood. Gates nodded and addressed me. "Sergeant Monroe, the doctor said another half hour and she should be ready to go back to the jail." "Sounds good." I knocked on the glass and pulled back the curtain slightly to get a peek. Mandy saw me and waved me in. I waited. "Is it all right to come in?" The doctor turned to see who I was. "Do you want visitors, young lady?" "Yes," Mandy said. "Sergeant Monroe can come in." "How's she doing, doctor?" He chuckled.
She'll make it. She has 6 stitches, a broken nose that I've just set, and 2 eyes that will turn black and blue by tomorrow. Other than that, she'll be fine. I'll be done here in a few minutes."
I took a seat next to the exam table Mandy was lying on and pulled out my notepad.
"Want to tell me what happened? Did you provoke Whitney Smith?"
Mandy scoffed. "You can ask anyone. There were at least 200 witnesses there. That wackadoodle woman jumped the guy from the website right as he passed her to go testify. I was minding my own business and sitting next to my attorney. The deputy yanked her off the website guy and she flew back against our table. That's when she punched me in the nose. Everyone saw it. Talk about a psycho."
"I would watch my tongue if I were you. You're far from innocent, Mandy. Why did you want me here?"
"Because you're the only person I trust. I'm not very popular in this town, you know. I think most people would like to see me dead."
"You'll be safe at the jail. I doubt if the rest of the trial going forward will be in open court."
The doctor washed his hands.
"Okay, I've done all I can. The nurse will come in with instructions for Miss Blakely and set up her next appointment. She'll need a prescription for pain pills. I'll see her in 10 days to remove the stitches and check if her nose set properly. Have a nice day." "Skip the prescription. She'll be fine with aspirin." I thought it was in Mandy's best interest not to take any form of opioid. She already had enough problems.
The doctor nodded.
"If you insist." The nurse wrote down Mandy's next appointment, handed me the card, and we left.
"Can I sit in the front seat with you?"
she asked as I led her to the cruiser. "Yeah, I don't think so. I'll find out when your trial is going to resume and let you know. Until then, you go back to your daily activity."
"Which is doing nothing."
"Doing nothing is a lot better than being in prison, Mandy. Count what few blessings you have left." I drove to the sheriff's department and led Mandy upstairs and handed her off to John. "I'll let you know about the trial when I hear more."
Chapter 12. Robert. With the 7 pages of paperwork read and signed, Robert Lynch was given a cloth sack and 5 minutes for a final gathering of his personal belongings from the cell. He pulled 10 years of faded photographs off the walls and rubber-banded the 24 letters he had saved. He dropped a few toiletries and several magazines into the sack and had a final look at the 6-by-8-foot space that had been his home for the last 10 years. He nodded and was escorted to the discharge holding area where his clothing, wallet, and watch had been stored for a decade. Robert signed the final release papers, changed into his street clothes, and dropped the wallet into his pocket. He shoved everything else into the sack, then continued on with the guard. They reached and passed through 4 sets of heavy steel doors before the final one opened to the freedom that awaited him.
"Good luck, Robert," the guard said. "I hope we don't see you back here again."
The command to open the 2-story outer door was confirmed, and USP Atlanta prisoner number 440286F no longer existed. Robert Lynch walked out to his first day of freedom in 10 years. The solid steel door groaned as it closed loudly at his back. He opened his wallet and checked the contents as he walked out. $8 and an expired driver's license. His smile widened when he saw the rusty red and white pickup truck idling in the outer courtyard of the visitors' parking area. The driver's side window opened, and Tony, his younger brother by 2 years, popped his head out and grinned. He looked up from the driver's seat and flipped off the guard, watching them from the tower.
"It's about damn time I see you in something other than that ugly orange jumpsuit. Get your ass in the truck. We got a lot of catching up to do."
Robert pulled open the door on the 1995 Dodge Ram and climbed in.
"I can't believe you're still driving this hunk of shit." "Hey, it's a ghost truck. It isn't registered to me, and the plates are stolen. It's perfect as long as I don't get pulled over. I stay off the main roads anyway."
Robert jammed his belongings into the footwell and gave his brother a hearty slap on the shoulder, then grabbed the pack of menthol cigarettes off the dash and shook one out. He lit it, inhaled deeply, and blew the smoke out slowly through his nose.
He stared at Tony for a moment, then laughed. "What's with the hair?" "Always a critic." Tony pulled the visor down and checked himself in the mirror. "What's wrong with the way I look?" "Just giving you shit, man. Don't get so defensive. It's just that I've never seen you with a full beard and hair that long. And I've never seen you with a buzz cut. Was that their going-away present to you?" Tony pointed at Robert's temples. "Looks like there's some gray coming through, too." Tony cranked the steering wheel to the right and peeled out onto the street. "Has to be the anxiety." Robert rubbed his forehead and heaved a sigh. "It's damn good to be out of that hellhole. I'm looking forward to making up for lost time. But first I want a greasy burger and fries." "You got it, man. Ma's on pins and needles waiting to see you, though, so we better use the drive-thru. Don't mention we ate. She's putting snacks together." Tony leaned toward Robert and looked down at his leg. "No tracker?" Robert chuckled. "No tracker, and my first parole meeting isn't for another month." Tony slapped the steering wheel and laughed. "Sweet!" He tapped a cigarette out of the pack and lit one for himself. "Sounds like we have a plan, dude. There'll be plenty of time to get the job done, have a little fun, and be back in Atlanta before anyone knows we've left." He pulled up to the window of the fast food restaurant and ordered. At the house on the southeast side of downtown, Robert and Tony's mother, Leah, their cousin Mark, his wife Pam, and their uncle James would be waiting, according to Tony. Robert had pictured them surrounding the table in that cramped kitchen and watching anxiously out the window for the truck to return. An hour after he'd left, Tony pulled into the driveway and parked. "Looks like our company's already here," Robert said when he noticed several vehicles parked at the curb. "We have to celebrate your homecoming, dude. Come on, Ma's waiting." Tony and Robert entered the modest white bungalow they grew up in and into the waiting arms of Leah, their mother. The family matriarch and only remaining parent hugged her eldest son and wiped the tears clouding her eyes. "Bobby, you're finally home, and nobody is ever going to take you away from me again." Robert embraced his mother and kissed her cheek. "That's right, Ma, but justice still needs to be served." Leah swatted the air. "Let the good Lord handle that. I just want to enjoy seeing you here every day." James, Leah's brother, slapped Robert on the back. "It's been a while, Bobby. Let's have a seat outside and get reacquainted over a beer." The men gathered on the patio. They sat on mismatched chairs under the sun-faded umbrella, each holding a cold beer and a lit cigarette. James stared at the ground as if he were counting the cracks in the aged cement. "You know, I worry about your ma. She's the only sister I have. Tony has done a good job helping out since your old man got sent up for the second time. You heard he died in the can." "Yeah, and I don't care. Just tell me what you're getting at." Robert glared at his uncle as he took a swig of beer. James was an outspoken man, and someone Robert had never liked. He had a way of sticking his nose in places it didn't belong. "Well, you're a lot like your pa. I guess the apple didn't fall far from the tree, with the both of you spending years in prison. There's something in your blood, the two of you. You have an itch that can't be satisfied. Your old man never took care of your ma when he was around. He beat her regularly, and he was a mean drunk. You need to be there for your mother, Bobby, and you need to control your temper and impulses, or you'll be back in prison sooner than you think. I don't need your advice, old man. Stay out of my business." Robert stood and clenched his fists. Tony grabbed Robert's arm. "Hey, bro, take it easy. Sit back down. This is supposed to be a homecoming party. You don't want Ma to see you upset."
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.